Good morning, good afternoon, good day, and good evening. Now, I don't know what time of day it is for you, but for me, it's the good time of day. I guess I'm struggle streaming already. I'm just sitting here right now. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, and good evening. Now, let's see exactly what's going on here. Hold on. For me, it's the good time of day. I guess I'm struggle streaming already. I'm just sitting here right now. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, and good evening. Now, let's see exactly what's going on here. Hold on. For me, it's the good time of day. I guess I'm struggle streaming already. I'm just sitting here right now. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, and good evening. Let's see exactly what's going on here. Hold on. Me struggle streaming already. I'm just sitting here right now. I am not exactly sure what's going on here. Hold on 1 minute here. Bear with me. I hear an echo that's consistently going on. Struggle streaming already. I'm just sitting here right now. I am not exactly sure what's going on here. Hold on 1 minute here. Bear with me. I hear an echo that's consistently going on. All right, let's try this now. Hopefully this is a little better. Hopefully you're not able to hear all the noise and whatnot. All right, let's try it. Gotta love it. In any event, we are on now. Let me see if I can. I love it. In any event, we are on now. I can. I am so tempted to try and see if I can jump out and jump back in. Everything was running good. Put a 1 in the chat if you can hear me fine without an echo. If not, that's fine also. I'm hoping that you guys can hear me okay and that you guys are not hearing the noise in the background that I was hearing a moment ago. Let me take a look here one more time, make sure that I'm seeing what I'm seeing. In the background that I was hearing a moment ago. Let me take. Okay. So if you're hearing me good, if everything's good, thank you very much there, Ms. Kurtz. I am going to jump into this. Today, we're talking about sports. It is a sports day. Today, we are talking about football. We are talking about why Eric, the enemy, Beienimy, is the new enemy of the NFL. And I feel comfortable talking about it because it looks like he just re-upped, re-signed, re-inked a new contract. And so it's not like I'm in here doing any damage to the enemy. But I want to talk about some things that are significant in this regards because it's an ongoing topic. It's something that keeps on happening. And they keep on moving the goalposts for Black coaches, specifically Black coaches that are in a position or in line for head coaching positions. So I don't know how many people out there are familiar with the old adage when it comes to real estate, that in regards to real estate, there are three things that are key. They are the most important things. The three most important things in real estate is location, location, and location. Those are the three most important things in real estate. Very similarly, if you're talking about advertising, the three most important things in advertising, the top three things that you're going to be dealing with in advertising or marketing rather, is that you have test, test, and test. And what does that mean? That means that similar to how location is a top priority, you want to test what kind of copy you're putting out there. When we talk about copy, we're talking about the type of materials that you're putting out there to see whether or not people are actually going to come in and give you money, which is what you're actually searching for, right? You want money for the stuff that you're putting out there, and you're looking now to see whether or not that's actually going to happen or not. And so that's what those are the three most important things. You want to see, okay, if I put this out, you'll put it out in different advertisers, such as put this out on a newspaper, which really not there anymore, on this website or on that website or on this television ad. And you're looking to see which one brings in the most eyeballs, the people that buy the most. And you do that with all your marketing materials. You have an idea, You know exactly as a where you need to market at, whether it's the radio or television, and what radio stations and what their demographics are, but you don't know for sure whether or not that ad is going to hit unless you test it. So what does that have to do, if anything, with what we're talking about with the NFL, with Eric the enemy Beienimy? This past week, Tuesday, the 15th, there was an article that came out for the Kansas City in Kansas City. And that article was there, and it essentially eviscerated Eric Beienimy. So much so that on from the 15th until the 18th, all of the popular Kansas City channels, all of the popular news sites were sitting up there talking about, should Eric Beienimy be terminated? Should they get rid of the enemy, Eric Beienimy? Right. So here we have a situation where you have a coach who's been extremely successful, took you to multiple title conferences, took you to a Super Bowl, along with as an offensive coordinator, along with the head coach Andy Reid, and now we're talking about, should he be fired? Should we still be putting up with Eric the enemy Beienimy? Why has the narrative changed? Well, we'll talk about that in a hot minute. But it's interesting when I'm going to mention some of them, and because of fair use and some things that have been going on here recently, I'm not going to post or put up clips or excerpts of these channels. I'm going to mention them by name. You can definitely, by all means, go back in there, take a look at it, and check my work, right? Check to see exactly what it is that I'm talking about, and whether or not it's factual or not. But in dealing with it, I'll start with on the 18th, there was one YouTube channel talking about how it's called How About Them Chiefs, or How About Those Chiefs YouTube channel. And he posted 2 times specifically dealing with this article. One was he talked in depth about the article and what was stated within the article. He was able to go find it. He pulled it up. He read it. He read from it a little bit. He talked about the article. The other was one where he just talked about some of the outcomes he felt trying to justify the article. And he did that before he talked about the actual article itself, which was pretty interesting because the article went up and the article went right back down. Why did they take the article down? Well, we'll talk about why they took it down in a minute, but it was interesting that the narrative that came out of that article, right? No proof. It cited multiple sources, but didn't name one. I heard through the grapevine that you were always going to be mine, right? This is a bad game of telephone. Not one source cited, multiple sources. We've checked it. We validated it. We've done it with multiple sources, and we don't name one. We can't sit there and validate it with one. And it was interesting because one of the things that they did, they really went at the character of Eric Beienimy, right? They really did make him an enemy. They talked as a point to kind of confirm, since the article didn't name any sources, they went through on this channel about How About Those Chiefs, and they pulled up Broncos insider Benjamin Albright, who's had dealings with Eric Beienimy in the past. He was the source, since the article didn't name a source, that they were going to utilize. And in here, they said that, hey, he's worked with many people in the NFL, and he could say that there's a great deal of truth to that article, that linemen said that Eric Beienimy couldn't get, or there's a specific lineman who talked about Eric Beienimy couldn't get a play called in time. And that was why Patrick Mahomes had to audible and get, and him, and there was headbutting between him and Andy Reid. They talked about the fact that when he was a running backs coach in Minnesota, him and Adrian Peterson bumped heads and they didn't get along. And then it even went further to say that, hey, and it's kind of interesting that they went to this point, because it tacitly, kind of on the sly, on the down low, on the DL, starts talking about how nepotism exists in the NFL, right? Or they acknowledge that nepotism exists in a backdoor type way. When they talked about that one of the executives, who's now a GM with another team, with the Chicago Bears, that Ryan Pauls, who worked with Eric Beienimy, he was there at the Kansas City Chiefs for a number of years in various positions there, and that when Ryan Pauls, when he left, and he's there. He has a Eric Beienemy couldn't even get a sniff, couldn't even get a peek at a head coaching job as far as an interview with the Chicago Bears. And Ryan Pauls is black, like Eric Beienemy. So if you're a black man, and we know that white people hire their own, then obviously black people should hire their own as well, right? That completely ignores what happened with things like, oh, I don't know, like say with the Texans and Lovie Smith not being able to hire his own quarterbacks coach, that he had to get Josh McCown because he has to groom his successor. They want Josh McCown. They couldn't just outright hire him, but he had to groom his successor. And we ignore things and issues like that that point to black people not really having the authority or the power that they say that black people do have when they become GMs, right? So there was a lot of contradiction in what he was talking about there. However, one of the things that was very interesting is the fact that when he started talking about that if one black man wouldn't hire another, and it was because Eric Bieniemy was hard to deal with as being one of the criteria that you needed for a coach to be a head coach or a coach in general. And I find that very interesting because we just had a situation where Jim Harbaugh, who was the head coach up there in Michigan, he used to be head coach out in San Fran or whatnot, but he's coming back down, and he came down and interviewed, and everybody talked about he probably would get the job, and nobody really talked about, or they mentioned it in passing, but it was like viewed as a positive, a net positive, that he was hard to get along with, right? Or you look at somebody like, I don't know, like Bill Belichick, one of the winningest coaches. People call him an all-time great. And we look at his relationship with Tom Brady, and you recognize that he is hard to deal with. And that's never been viewed as a reason on why it is we need to get rid of this person as a coach, specifically if they're a white person. But if you're a black person, then yes, that's a reason to disqualify, to take somebody off, to not deal with someone as a coach. And that's what they did. They just went through this whole deal of character assassination of Eric Bieniemy this entire time, right? And it was interesting that as they were talking about it, that the meat has if they did a test with that article, the results of that test were outstanding because you had that channel, you had another channel. Let me get the name. I don't want to sit there and no, this one was also about how about those Chiefs. You had one Chiefs report by Chat Sports. That was another one that came out. And there was a fourth channel. Yeah, third channel that also dealt with it. And it was interesting. Going back to the How About Those Chiefs channel, they focus intently on Eric Bieniemy's relationship with Patrick Mahomes and that they didn't get along. And I don't know if there's any validity to that or not, but saying a head coach and a prominent player does not get along, but they can have a level of success is not new in the NFL. It should not be a disqualifier for a head coaching position or even an offensive coordinator position. It is interesting also that on another channel, Chiefs Report by Chat Sports, one of the things that they focused on when they talked about that article, they kept talking like, oh, we don't know if it's actual, factual, blah, blah, blah. But then they kept giving tacit support to that article. And not only did they give tacit support, at various times when you're listening to it, as they're talking about it, they just kept on giving support or credence to what the article talked about. They acknowledged that, give me 1 minute. I want to sit there and pull up some of these that I have that are actually time sensitive on what they actually talked about with it. Because they talked about the coaching tree for Sean McVay, but they neglected the Andy Reid coaching tree. They talked about at the 10:30 mark, they acknowledged that the NFL has told Eric Bieniemy that he will not become a head coach by being a coordinator with the Kansas City Chiefs. And that's very interesting to me because traditionally you need to have an OC position or a DC position, a coordinator position in the NFL in order to ascend to the role of head coach in the NFL. And that's no longer the case. At various points, like at the 19-minute mark, they engaged in a conversation where they tried to put all the blame for the loss in the conference final at the feet of the offensive coordinator instead of at the feet of Andy Reid, where it deserves to be because he's the head coach. Traditionally, you always give the blame for a loss to the head coach. We could acknowledge that, yes, the OC or the DC might have had a boneheaded call or whatever, but ultimately it falls on the head coach. And with black coaches, if you're an OC or a DC, you need to be prepared that you're also going to begin to take all of the criticism that and responsibility that traditionally goes to a head coach is going to come to you as the coordinator because you're black. Then at the 22-minute mark in that same broadcast they had on that channel, they talked about it just wasn't a good look for Eric Beienemy and how everything was going. Or at the 23-minute mark, they gave more credibility and said that the best thing for Eric Beienemy at that time was to walk away from being an OC in Kansas City. So you have a winning tradition. You're successful where you're at. You're able to get in there and to go about really go about being successful and building a great legacy for yourself, a great resume. And they say, yeah, just go do it someplace else. We're gonna move the bar. We're gonna move that goalpost further out for you because you're a black coordinator. Let me share something with you because this is something that I found that was interesting in talking about it or in dealing with it rather. Is when you look at the number of black head coaches in the NFL. There's 32 teams in the NFL today. We've had less than 32 black head coaches over the course of the NFL. Here's a list here. Let me share this with you. Let me share my screen with you here real fast. And I want you to take a look at this. This is a list. This is a comprehensive list, or it might not be as comprehensive as I would like it to be, but this is a list. Let me make this bigger because that is embarrassingly small. So let's come down here. So Mike Tomlin, Brian Flores has been a coach, Andy Lynn, Fritz Pollard, Tony Dungy, Marvin Lewis, Hugh Jackson, Dennis Green, Lovie Smith, Mike Singletary, Herm Edwards, Ray Rhodes, Jim Caldwell, Art Shell, Todd Bowles, Vance Joseph, Steve Wilkes, Romeo Crennel, Raheem Morris, Leslie Frazier. That's your list of head coaches in the history of the NFL. Black head coaches. That's the history of the NFL. Let's look at current head coaches, right, that you're dealing with in NFL, and let's see how many of these that we can point to and say, hey, these are black head coaches. And it's interesting when you look at this list. Let me see if I can make this one bigger as well. Maybe that's a little too big for you. I don't know. We're just going to leave it there. But if you look at this list of coaches in the NFL and you're looking for black faces, you're hard pressed to find them, right? You can look at the Houston Texans. That would be one, and he had to hire Josh McCown, who's going to be his replacement, right? So here it is that Lovie Smith comes on, and Lovie Smith has to hire his replacement because the same way that they just got rid of the previous black head coach and want to move on to a white head coach and give him an opportunity, they're going to do the same thing right now with Lovie Smith. And it's sad, but when you look at it, that's what it is. Or you look at Mike Tomlin being on this list, there is a huge lack of diversity with all of these coaches in the NFL. I mean, they're just, if you look at the list and you see when they're hired, and then their qualifications. So you take somebody like Eric Beienemy, who has a better record than Matt Eberflus. I mean, whatever his name is, or Nathaniel Hackett. He has a better record than Nathaniel Hackett. You got Mike McDaniel. You got Kevin O'Connell. I mean, people with no experience whatsoever. Brian Debold. Who else is on this list? I mean, you look at the coaches that are on this list, and you look at how many of them have lose. You have quite a few that have just losing records. Robert Sala, I mean, horrible losing records as coaches, right? And whether it's where they're at or their previous location, they just these are people with horrible losing records, right? And they still get a sniff. They still get to be in Josh McDaniels, 39% winning ratio. You just look at them. 2.93% winning ratio for Dan Campbell with the Detroit Lions. You mean to tell me that you couldn't do any better that or Zach Taylor or Matt Rule or I mean, you look at these records and you say, well, they have a bad team. I give you that they have a bad team. And any black coach would be going in there, they'd be going into a bad team as well. And then you have somebody like Brian Flores, who also was there on a bad team, right? And he gave them a winning and he came away with a winning record as a beating Bill Parcells on multiple occasions. I mean, not Bill Parcells, Bill Belichick. Wrong Bill. Because I'm thinking of Bill Parcells' coaching tree. So here we're looking at it, and you're seeing that emphatically, empirically, that you have a series of individuals who are not there based on merit. And the narrative now, we have to move the goalposts because we know that traditionally black coaches or the path to becoming a head coach, you have to be a DC or an OC in order to get that position as a head coach and be successful at doing it. Andy Reid himself said, yes, most definitely when we're talking about him, my boy, he calls the plays. Right? He's not the enemy in Kansas City, right? He might have a harsh or grating personality, which as many of the coaches, when you talk to players about them, will tell you that their coaches have grating personalities. There's some of them that are the players' coaches that they will run through a wall for or whatnot. But there's quite a few others that are grating in their personality and their dealings with others, right? And it's one of those things that as you're going through it and as you're seeing exactly what it is they're doing, it becomes readily apparent that these individuals are there not based on merit, but because they're in good with somebody. There's a level of nepotism that's there. Think about how many head coaching jobs there were that were available this year, right? This year, there were a number of head coaching jobs. I believe that number was 9. Yes, it was 9. Actually, I'll share that with you as well. Let's come in here. Let's take a look at this. So here you have 9 head coaching vacancies that were available this year, right? And out of those 9, they were literally forced to make sure that Lovie Smith was one of those, just so they could kind of get off of the stench that they've had of looking at it and saying that there is an element of racism involved in the selection of head coaches in the NFL. And so now we also need to make sure that so now we're looking at somebody like Eric Beienimy. Why would they do a hit piece on Eric Beienimy at this point? Why would they fix their eyes on Eric Beienimy to make him the enemy in the NFL? You got to cut the legs out from up under him, right? Up until this point, everybody's been pointing to Eric Beienimy. So now you got to tear him down so that on the next cycle, his name isn't as hot as it was for the past few cycles. He's been held up. Why hasn't Eric got a job? Why hasn't he been put in? Why hasn't he got a sniff for a head coaching position? Why isn't anybody contacting Eric Beienimy? He's been an offensive coordinator. He's been calling plays for the Chiefs this entire time. He called plays for the Chiefs back when they won the NFL title. He's been calling plays for the Chiefs when they were on their slump and then getting them back up. He's been the one that has been calling these plays this entire time. How is it that Eric Beienimy can't even get a sniff of an NFL head coaching job? Well, they go about doing that by making sure that they now have to tear down Eric Beienimy. He is now the enemy number 1 in the NFL. And going forward, don't be surprised if you watch this upcoming season because test, test. They're going to test to see if they can get that narrative to go for Eric Beienemy now. That he isn't as good as everybody says he is. That he has problems outside of just calling the X's and O's. He can't lead a team. He's not a leader of men. He butts heads with prominent players. Other black executives do not like Eric Beienemy. Eric Beienemy grates on many people. Brian Flores, yes, he has a might have been grading, but he was a winner. But Eric Beienemy doesn't have the same disposition. Going forward, don't be surprised as you listen to these narratives get pushed about Eric Beienemy. Just think of him as Eric, the enemy of the NFL going forward. Going forward, next coaching cycle, there'll be a lot more vacancies that come up as far as head coaches go. And Eric Beienemy will not be in contention for any of them. Even though if you look at his track record, Eric Bienemy's track record speaks for himself, right? You look at what he was able to accomplish and the fact that he actually paid his dues, right? Let me show you this one as well. And this is another one that I did. I think what I'm going to start doing, I'm going to start prettying these up before we sit down and talk about them. But here's the coaching career of Eric Beienemy. So after he finished playing in 1999, he was at Colorado as a running backs coach from 2001, 2002. So he was at the college. Then he went to UCLA as a running backs coach from 2003 to 2005. He then moves up to the NFL, and he's at the Minnesota Vikings from 2006 to 2009 as a running backs coach. At the Vikings, he also is not just the running backs coach in 2010. He's also the assistant head coach, right? Then in Colorado, then he goes back to Colorado 2011 to 2012 as the offensive coordinator. So he's been a running backs coach, assistant head coach. Now he's an OC in Colorado. He now comes to the Kansas City Chiefs 2013, 2017 as a running backs coach. And then he is the OC from 2018 till the day, right? That includes a stint at the Super Bowl. Correction, 2 stints at the Super Bowl, 1 Super Bowl win, right? And multiple AFC championship games. So it's clear when you look at it and you see exactly what's going on that they need to change the narrative on Eric Beienemy. You cannot continue to go forward year after year hiring white coaches when you have qualified black coaches. And the only way you can continue to do that is when you see a black coach come up and he's starting to get that shine, is that you now need to take him down a peg. You now need to make sure that if anything, you need to talk about all of his flaws that traditionally are the purview of the head coach. If a call is bad, we know that many head coaches don't make their own calls or don't do their own calls in the game. Bill Belichick was famous for it. Nobody says and when they fail, they don't go, you know what, Tom called an audible or this happened or that happened or this person did it. It's Bill Belichick lost that game. And you might say Tom Brady as well because they went hand in hand at the time, but you didn't see them blaming the other coaches. That just was not something that they did. The other coaches did not receive any of the blame that goes along with losing. Why? Because it's the head coach that's calling the shots, that's ultimately responsible, right? When Andy Reid was in Philadelphia and he didn't have a black OC or a black DC, they didn't worry about blaming anybody else. They were like, Andy Reid can't get over the big one. Andy Reid messed up on the play calls. Why? Because Andy Reid was the head coach. Now we know, and everybody in the back rooms know, that you have an offensive coordinator and defensive coordinators who are calling a lot of the plays. Bill Belichick might call a lot of the defensive plays, but on the offensive side of the ball, he left that to somebody else 9 times out of 10. And that was unacceptable, but he's still going to get the blame when something goes wrong. Now we're shifting that paradigm. We're moving that goalpost, and we're saying the person who's going to get the blame now is going to be Eric Beienemy going forward. So anytime there's an issue on the offense, look at the narrative that's going to be going forward. I'm hoping that as I say this, that I'm drawing attention to it, that they don't do it. that they don't start blaming Eric Bieniemy for every little issue that they have there in Kansas City, because that looks like that's the goal, right? They're testing it. If you see it go again and they test that narrative again, there's another issue that comes up in Kansas City and they start pointing to something again with Eric Bieniemy. He's just signed his contract, so I hope that they back off a little bit until at least middle of the season. But just look for them to actually start making those allegations that it's Eric Bieniemy's fault anytime there's a loss, anytime there's an issue, anytime the Kansas City Chiefs are suffering or struggling, that it's not going to be particularly on Andy Reid. They're going to start divvying out the blame, and they're going to divvy out a great majority of that blame to Eric, the enemy, Bieniemy. Mark my words. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully they make me wrong. I would enjoy eating my words. Please make me eat my words. Make it so that Eric Bieniemy is not viewed as a pariah or somebody that is there that cannot get that team over the hump, and it's his fault and not Andy Reid's, and that he will have the blame laid at his feet, which is traditionally the purview of the head coach. So I already dropped the link. Nobody came on up. I'm going to leave it as what it is right now, and I'm going to let you guys go. It's been a Sports Talk Saturday. We'll have another one tomorrow. We'll be talking sports again. This one, not as contentious. I think I'll leave my Saturdays or more than my contentious days. Sundays, I try to keep a little more on sports and the actual playing of the game, as opposed to the actual issues within the game on why it is the games suck. In any event, that's going to be it for me. And I know I didn't tell you before, I love you. Hope that you're having a blessed day, that the day is going great for you, and that you may always, always, always be blessed with peace in your life. And we are out of here.